We have a full quorum tonight. I've got on my left Councilmember at Large District 3, Councilmember from District 3, Clinton Truesdale, Councilmember District 4, Roxy Madu. On my right, I got Mayor Pro Tem and Councilmember District 2, Dufour Wolfley, Councilmember at Large Wanda Rogers, and our newest member, not to be forgotten, Councilmember District 1, Dr. Zipporah Miller. Do we have any agenda additions, deletions, or amendments tonight? Hearing none. Citizen participation. I know we have some folks who want to speak tonight. Madam City Clerk. All right, my first speaker tonight is Miss Jennifer Epps. And so for the speakers, just come directly to where those two podiums are, pull whichever microphone you'd like to you, talk into that microphone, and if you could just start by giving us your name and roughly what neighborhood you're in for the record. You don't have to give me an exact street address. And then you got about 3 minutes, and if we go over, I'll just gently say, move along.
All right, sounds good. Good evening, my name is Jennifer Epps, and we live in the Spring Meadows neighborhood of Bowie, Maryland. So, again, good evening, Mayor Esteve and the members of the council. My name is Jennifer Epps, and I have my husband, Will Epps, and our family resides in the city of Bowie. We are members of the DMV Marksmen Soccer Club. DMV Marksmen Soccer Club is a growing youth soccer club. More than 70% of our families live in the city of Bowie. And for the last several years, we have been unable to secure reliable field time at Allen Pond Park in our own city. And this is not for lack of trying. The leaders of the club have submitted requests through the proper channels year after year. Our calls and emails have frequently gone unanswered. On more than one occasion, we were granted fields and then had them taken away at the last minute, leaving dozens of Bowie kids with nowhere to practice. We've learned about legacy clubs, but we are still unclear about what that means and how does one become a legacy club. We recently learned that field permits at Allen Pond Park have been issued to a club based outside the city of Bowie and outside Prince George's County. We have requested the permit records under the Public Information Act, and I want to be clear, we're not here to ask that you exclude anyone from the Bowie parks. We are here to ask a simple question. When field time is allocated, shouldn't Bowie's own children come first on their fields where their parents pay taxes? All we want is a level playing field for our children, pun intended. We are asking the council for 3 things. First, a fall field allocation for our club at Allen Pond Park. Second, a written published field allocation policy that gives priority to organizations serving Bowie residents. And third, a designated point of contact and response time standard so that no one community group spends another year without straight answers. We have delivered, or we plan to deliver a letter, well, we already have it, sorry, to the mayor and the council, and we're planning to submit a sign-on letter from the parents of the Bowie families. We'd welcome a meeting with the city manager and Parks and Recreation in the mayor's office before the fall season. Thank you.
Thank you all for your service.
Thank you, Ms. Epps. And then I think possibly on the same topic, we have Mr. Gerald Gray. How are you tonight, sir?
Doing
And
well.
ma'am.
How are you? Good evening, Mayor and council members. Thank you for giving us the opportunity and the time to speak tonight. My name is Gerald Gray. I'm a Bowie resident. I'm a coach in Bowie, volunteer coach. I'm a business owner in Bowie as well. I'm a parent of 2 daughters that play for the DMV Marksmen, and someone who cares deeply about providing opportunities for the youth in our community. My wife and I are both originally from the Midwest. Maybe 17 years ago, we decided to buy a house and raise our family in the Bowie because it's such a great community. The residents, the people that we've met have been great, very progressive. Being part of this community, let me see. So originally when we started in this community, we had our 2 daughters. We wanted them to get involved, so we thought of sports just to stay in shape, be active. Started out with soccer. We did join the Bowie Boys and Girls Club, or FC clubs. Great. There's volunteer parents that kind of help out with those organizations. However, as we continued the process, we noticed that the development piece wasn't necessarily there. Also, we have 2 daughters, and when you join those clubs in the area, it's co-ed. And as you get a little bit older, there's a difference. The boys start to get a little bit stronger. The average boys are stronger than probably the average girls. The girls really don't get a chance to excel, practice their skills. And so we ended up hearing about an organization called Marksman. And some of our neighbors told us about the organization. We transitioned to the Marksman organization, and it was the best decision that we ever made. Mark and Larry, they work on the kids' skills. Not only do they develop the skills, but they develop leadership skills, confidence, lasting friendships. And so it's been a really, really positive organization. I'm just going to go into my notes here. Ironically, the other night, my wife had asked the girls, when you hear Marksman, what do you think about? And my oldest daughter said she thinks about family. My youngest daughter says she thinks about fun and friends. She's 8, one's 11, one's 8. And that just kind of melted my heart. And it's what I think every parent wants. They want to be a part of an organization like that. So we think that the DMV Marksmen are providing something truly unique to this area. Not only are they helping kids develop skills, but they're also doing it, offering it at an affordable price. So there's more involvement. If you know about soccer, like going to clubs and stuff can be extremely expensive, and a lot of people are pushed out, but these guys, they're truly passionate about it. They love it. They're doing it at a very cheap price for what they're offering, and even assisting families that might need assistance. Not only do Mark and Larry emphasize the athletic piece, they're trying to develop these kids in other areas as well. So we're just extremely happy at what these guys are doing, to give you the front piece. But today, as Jennifer said, we're not here to talk about anybody getting excluded or not having the usage of the fields. We're here to ask, let me see. So we're here to just try to ask about being included in this process. Over the past several years, talking to Mark, he's repeatedly tried to secure practice fields in Allen Pond, reaching out numerous occasions. I don't think there's been much transparency. He hasn't had much help. Sometimes when he's allocated the fields, they've maybe been pulled from him. There's different changes. It's not real clear to us as parents. And I think Jennifer spoke on it. As far as the families, 70%, more than 70% of the families reside right here in Bowie. And respectfully, I think she mentioned also they had mentioned that there's groups from outside of the Bowie area that have gotten permits to use these fields, and we're in the Bowie area in residence, and we're struggling to get these fields. So anything that can be done will be helpful.
And sorry, I'll just need you to make your final point.
Oh, okay.
We got to go on the next one.
So basically, as she said, we're just asking to be part of the legacy process. I think it was the legacy process. And if they can, let us know the clear criteria of what we need to do to basically be considered to get these fields. So any help we can get, we'd appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Understood. And to the Grays and the Epps, thank you so much for everything you're doing. The young folks depend on you guys, the adults, for taking the lead on this work, and so I really appreciate you. Staff, real quick, I know that this has come up in a few different angles over the summer. I asked for 2 things. One, as a follow-up to this conversation, could you have Nick or the relevant staff member email all council with a short description of current field allocation policies and how that works separately in our either Thursday or Friday check-in this week? Can you just give me a briefing from Nick, and let's see how we can move forward on this? Okay. Thank you, team.
Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for coming out. Next up, I have Miss Joanne Marshall-Hobbs.
Good evening, Mayor Mike, council members, Ms. Jones. My name is Joanne Marshall-Hobbs. I'm from District 3 of Bowie, Maryland. I'm here today to talk about the Thrive Small Business Grant Program. Over the years, I've had the pleasure of working with many of you through my service on the city's IT committee. And also, I would like to welcome Dr. Miller to the council. I'm here this evening to express my profound disappointment that Exclusive Systems LLC was not selected as a recipient of the City of Bowie's Thrive Small Business Grant Program. The program offered grants up to $5,000 to eligible small businesses located within the City of Bowie municipalities. Exclusive Systems met all of the program's eligibility requirements. We applied for funding to acquire technology and equipment that would strengthen our ability to serve clients and continue growing our business. The explanation I received for the denial was, in summary, that our application did not sufficiently demonstrate growth, expansion, and job creation, and that other businesses presented greater opportunities for employment, growth, and brick-and-mortar expansion. I respectfully disagree with that assessment. I've been a Bowie homeowner since 2001. In 2002, I founded Exclusive Systems LLC, a minority and woman-owned small business reserve firm providing business development and information technology consulting services. We serve government agencies, nonprofit organizations, corporations, small businesses, and individual clients throughout the region. We are also proud to be a state of Maryland master contractor. Beyond operating a successful business, I have invested my time and expertise in improving the City of Bowie. Since 2012, I've served on the city's IT committee. From 2018 to 2022, I was the secretary, and currently, since 2022, I am the vice chair. This volunteer role has required hundreds of hours of research, planning, and collaboration to help shape the city's technology future. Beginning in 2019, Exclusive Systems researched small city initiatives, met with municipalities that had successfully implemented similar programs, collaborated with Prince George's County technology leadership, and ultimately contributed to Bowie's Smart City Framework and Strategic Plans. Those recommendations helped position Bowie for long-term technological modernization, economic development, and organizational growth. These are measurable contributions to the city's future. My commitment to Bowie extends beyond technology. In 2014, my husband and I made a deliberate decision to invest in Bowie by opening a Wingstop franchise in Bowie Town Center. If most of you remember, it was another restaurant that was occupying that space, Quiznos. They went out of business and the space would have been empty. We renovated and occupied a vacant commercial space that otherwise would have remained empty. Although we had other options throughout Maryland, we intentionally chose to invest in the community where we lived and we believed in Bowie's economic future. Today, I serve as president of Woodmont Highlands Homeowners Association, where we work closely with the city to promote code compliance, neighborhood beautification, community engagement, and partnerships with elected officials, first responders, and city staff. Our goal has always been to strengthen the relationship Our goal has always been to strengthen the relationship between Bowie and our homeowners. I would ask that the city's evaluation criteria recognize the realities of today's business environment. The comments I received appear to favor a traditional business model centered on brick and mortar, expansion and permanent employee growth. However, today's economy is different. Successful consulting firms grow by leveraging technology, specialized expertise, strategic partnerships, and flexible staffing models. These approaches reduce overhead, improve efficiency, and enable businesses to remain competitive while continuing to create economic value. Growth should not be measured solely by physical office space or the number of full-time employees. Innovation, technology investment, strategic leadership, community impact, and economic contributions are equally important indicators of a thriving business. The purpose of the grant request was to acquire technology and equipment that would allow us to expand our capabilities, better serve our clients, and continue contributing to Bowie's economy. While I understand there's not a formal appeal process, I respectfully request that the city's review both its evaluation criteria and the basis for this decision to ensure that businesses making long-term contribution to Bowie are fully recognized in funding opportunities. Thank you for your time, your consideration, and your service.
Ms. Marshall-Hobbs, thank you for coming up tonight. And I know between HOA leadership and IT committee leadership and all other forms of leadership and business ownership, you've been quite the triple threat in our community, and so I appreciate you. I don't know what the criteria was for this particular grant. Could I just ask staff as a follow-up to send council information on what the grant was, what the criteria was, the reason for the selection?
We will
some more
be delighted to share with you the information sent out and the applications awarded.
Sounds good.
Mr. Mayor, can you also share that with Councilmember Truesdale, Brady, and myself?
Well, I'm asking this to go to everyone. Yeah, the whole
Okay,
council.
thank you.
We got you.
Our report will be sent to all of council. The report will go to all of council.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Wanda. And thank you, Ms. Marshall-Hobbs. Next up, Ms. Millie, oh, I'm sorry. I've actually got Andrea White and then Ms. Millie Hall. I apologize, Millie. Ms. Andrea White.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I don't have a presentation for you, so I do apologize for that. I'm just here just as a concerned resident. I'm a resident of Colleton Station, and I'm just here concerning the budget that was passed and the notification process to the residents of Bowie. I feel like that there should have been an official letter in addition to the other measures that I know that was used to announce the increase in the tax rate. Personally, I think that increase was just very high at one time. I feel like that increase should have been part of the budget over a period of time. But that large increase at one time, I felt like, the consideration of how that was going to have an impact on our residents. I'm not sure the process that you went through to make that decision. And I'm not sure exactly where the extra funds or money is needed in whatever projects or whatever our cost is in our city. However, I am concerned that the increase on the residents' hopefully is not the only way that we get our tax revenue, and that this will not be a future indication of what's going to happen to the city of Bowie. I respectfully ask you to send out an official notification to the residents, just noting the increase of the tax rate, because there's a lot of information for people to go through on the website, in your meetings, in the budget sessions. There's just a lot of information. And our community is aging, and I want to make sure that we're reaching everyone the best way possible. And so a notification would have helped, especially the elderly and those that also is not tax savvy, and that still we have residents that don't have access to a lot of things that we believe, technology and things that we believe they have access to. So I'm just asking, first of all, that you would consider an official letter just outlining the increase to all residents, and that in the future you would consider the amount of increase at one time and the tax burden that you just placed on the residents of Bowie. Because when I looked at my tax bill, it is almost as much as the taxes that we are paying in our county, and that is unacceptable. Thank you.
Thank you for coming out, Ms. White. Ms. White, if you send me an email or get information from staff, I can forward you a whole bunch of information that'll just be contextual. Also, just throwing this out here, if you're interested, last I checked, we have 5 vacancies on the City Finance Committee.
Okay.
They meet once a month. If it's something that you're interested in, I might recommend them. You're going to hang out with Mr. Bruce Miller, our finance director, a lot, and some other committee members, and they, if you're interested, are going to do a lot of deep dives into this as well.
Okay, thank you.
I appreciate you coming out tonight, Ms. White. And then I apologize, Ms. Millie Hall, to round us out.
Good evening, Council, Mayor. Congratulations, Dr. Miller, been on the council. I didn't write anything either. I'm here today to talk about nonprofit. I just set up a financial literacy for students 13 to 15. And I checked all around town. Everything is $50 an hour. That's unacceptable. We already come out of our pockets for money as far as nonprofits. And for everything to cost us, it doesn't make any sense. We just went upon our taxes, and every space is $50 an hour. That's not making any sense to me. So I would like for you guys to go and check that out, because a couple of years ago, when you built this, it wasn't a couple of years ago, when the new city hall was built, the Ken Hill building was supposed to be for nonprofits, and now they're saying $50 an hour. This isn't making any sense. So could you look into that and do something, because you're killing us? It doesn't make any sense for us to run around town and do all these things for free, and then we get nothing. $50 an hour, that's ridiculous. So do something for the nonprofit. The name of my organization is Concerned Citizens of Prince George's County, District 4, Surrounding Areas, Inc. We just set up a program, financial literacy for young people, which is needed. And we can't get free space in Bowie or in Prince George's. We literally had to go to Crofton. I find it unacceptable. We pay a lot of taxes here in Bowie. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. I'm aware that I think some of the libraries have some really nice meeting spaces and may offer them for free. Have you checked with them?
Nothing is free.
Not even at the South Bowie Library?
Nothing is free. $34 there an hour or something like that.
Okay.
And not only that, when you do a camp, do you want to rush the kids out? We need at least 3 to 4 hours. The library usually have you for 2 hours.
Yeah.
It's just not fair.
Do me a favor, hit me up this week and let's look around, see what we can do.
Say what?
Hit me up this week. Let's look around, see what we can find.
Okay, one more thing. You reminded me of something.
Okay.
Also, the permit for our block party for Community Day. I also found out after all these years, we went from $25 to $50. I find that unacceptable. Lack of communication, just $25, it's 100%. So why wouldn't you inch up little by little? $5 this year, $10 the next year. I find it unacceptable. Thank you.
4 vacancies on the Finance Committee. Thank you, Ms. Hall. That's what I have for the public speaking session. I will move us on to presentations. Anything, Ms. Hernandez, tonight?
No, Mayor, we don't have anything tonight.
Nothing on city boards and committees.
Correct.
Council announcements. Do I hear any council announcements? Nothing on my right, nothing on my left. City manager's report. Anything in particular from Ms. Jones?
Yes, I have a few remarks, Mayor. Mayor, council members, staff, and members of the Bowie community. Thank you so much for the warm welcome that I have received. I really appreciate it. I think I want to remain new for at least the next 10 years. It is a pleasure to attend my first regular council meeting as your newly appointed city manager. I am grateful for the trust that's been placed in me, and I'm excited to serve this community. My immediate priorities are to listen, learn, and work closely with the mayor, council members, city staff, residents, and community partners. Together, we will remain focused on priorities in terms of being responsive, transparent, and equitable treatment for the people that we serve. I look forward to building on Bowie's strengths and working collaboratively to address the opportunities ahead. Thank you, and I'm honored to be here. Additionally, I would like to extend an invitation for all of you to join us for our National Night Out event tomorrow at Allen Pond Park, beginning at 6 p.m. Thank you, Mayor. That's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. And for those of you who don't know, Angel Jones started July 20th as our new city manager. We up here are the part-time board of directors that make policy decisions from time to time and vote on budgets every year. But the day-to-day CEO who runs the town is right over there, Ms. Angel Jones. We got her from Missouri City, Texas. And even before her start date, she requested a ton of information and was very ready to go on day one. And I know you've dove right in and been working great with staff and council, and we're grateful to you. And we're especially grateful to Dan Mears and all of our staff for holding down the fort and making this transition extremely smooth. So thank you, Ms. Jones, and we look forward to working with you for another 20, 30 years. All right, thank you. Consent agenda. Do I hear a motion on the consent agenda?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move for approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
It's moved and seconded. Any questions on the motion? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Consent agenda adopted. Moving on to old business. Our item A under old business is the Private Economic Development Corporation for the City of Bowie. We'll receive a report from our consultant. I'm going to start by turning this over to city staff to contextualize a little bit. I don't know if this is for Mr. Mears or Mr. King, but I'll turn this over to the dais.
I'll gladly hand it to Mr. Mears, but he'll whoop me after the meeting, and I'd rather not have that
Fair enough.
aspect of it. Good evening, Council. I'm John Henry King, the Economic Development Director. Back in November of 2025, during a council meeting, the discussion turned to the idea of creating a private economic development corporation. And at that time, staff was requested to go out and get some information and come back to council. In the early part of this calendar year, we engaged the services of Mr. Frank Nero, who is standing before you now, who is very experienced in the creation and operation of private economic development corporations and operates under the curse of having been a reformed political elected official there. Tonight, the report is his to present. The copies have been available on the city's website for about a month. Each of you has been provided with them. They'll remain up on the report will remain up on the city's website for those who haven't had a chance to read it yet. Staff recommends to you tonight that you receive this report, you discuss it, and ask Mr. Nero as many questions as you have, and then consider what further guidance you'd like to provide staff in regard to this matter. I present to you Mr. Frank Nero.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Nero. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, city manager, city staff. I had a great meeting actually with the city manager today, and I know she's very busy, and I appreciate you giving me some time. It was a very frank and I think good discussion. Again, I appreciate the opportunity to present the findings of my report and subsequent recommendations. Tonight, I'm going to give you a summary. If you look at the report, it was like 177 pages, and I went into a lot of detail. Tonight, I'll try and give an overview and a summary of that. Throughout my career, and again, John has mentioned it, I've had the privilege of serving in both elected and appointed positions at local, county, state, and federal levels of government, as well as in the nonprofit and private sector leadership roles. My public service has included serving as a councilman, a mayor, a county commissioner, so I've sort of sat on that side of the podium in a previous life. I was a presidential appointee under President Jimmy Carter, where I oversaw 17 domestic agencies for New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands. I also served as a cabinet officer for 2 governors in the state of New Jersey. I was deputy mayor of Jacksonville, Florida. That was more of an appointed position, sort of like a county administrator more than a political position. I was president of a nonprofit development corporation in New Brunswick, New Jersey, and president and CEO of one of the nation's leading public-private economic development organizations. Now, I sat those experiences because I think it's given me a perspective of different economic development lessons that I learned. You know, the old thing about a consultant is someone from out of town with a briefcase. Well, I'm a consultant. I have the briefcase, but I'm not a technocrat. So I learned a lot of what I've learned by making mistakes and being on the job and working directly in the economic development field. The purpose of this evaluation was not to promote any particular model. It was determine which organizational structure might fit the city of Bowie best. Ultimately, this presentation is not about creating another organization. It's really about creating a process capable of implementing the economic development future of the city. Before I discuss my findings, I want to make one point very clear. This report should not be interpreted as a criticism of the city's current economic development department. There's been a lot of work that's been accomplished there. Quite to the contrary, I think you've been fortunate to have for over 20 years somebody like John King. People in my profession know that economic development can sometimes be a full contact sport, and the fact that he's sort of stayed the course, I think, is a credit to him. During my review, I found that Bowie has already established an economic development department, an economic development committee, an economic development strategy action plan, and there's a substantial body of documents and reports. Those are important accomplishments, and I think they can provide a foundation upon which my recommendations are built. My recommendation is not to start over. It is to build upon the foundation and organizational capacity to move from planning to implementation. The proposed public-private partnership that I will discuss and review is intended to become an implementation vehicle, one capable of accelerating the city's existing goals, partnerships, and increasing available resources. The idea is to really also engender better collaboration with the private sector and Bowie University in improving accountability through measurable results. In other words, these recommendations takes the existing city's work to the next level rather than replacing it. The Economic Development Department has laid the groundwork. The recommended organization that I will speak to you about is intended to complement those efforts by providing additional flexibility, stronger public-private partnerships, expanded fundraising opportunities, and the focused implementation needed to achieve Bowie's long-term economic vision. The recommendation, therefore, is evolutionary, not revolutionary. It recognizes the accomplishments and work of the current administration and the current city while providing Bowie with enhanced vehicle to implement goals and aspirations the city has already defined. So let me now go to the introduction of the report itself. Okay, the purpose of the report was to provide the city of Bowie with a legally supportive implementation orientation recommendation on whether a proposed municipal nonprofit development organization should be created. And if it is, what is the best path forward? Either a 501c3 or a 501c6 or a phased hybrid model. And those are really sort of the legal tax exempt criteria that most economic development organizations fall under. This report evaluates the principal nonprofit structures used by economic organizations in the United States, both 501c3 and 501c6, and applies that analysis to the city of Bowie's desire to evaluate whether to privatize existing economic development structure. The review focuses on legal structure and purpose, governance, advocacy capacity, operational fit, and long-term implementation flexibility. These are important questions that I think the city is going to have to consider before you decide whether to even create an economic development nonprofit. Why is a new structure needed? Should there even be a new structure, a new organization? How committed is the city to achieve its economic development objectives? It's not going to be easy if you decide to go the route of privatization because it's going to take a process. It's not going to be instant grits. It's going to create a long-term effort that you're going to have to do. How will this new EDO be funded and staffed? What will be the status of the current economic development department if a private nonprofit EDO is created? Should the Old Town CDC and the Bowie Chamber of Commerce be merged into any new nonprofit EDO, which has really been the trend in the economic development field? What should the relationship be between the new nonprofit and the Prince George County Economic Development Corporation? There's new leadership there, and I had the opportunity to speak to the new president, and I believe she's from Bowie. My candid opinion is that in the past, the city of Bowie has not been well served in many cases by some of the activities of that economic development organization. And so I think that as going forward, that interrelationship between the city, whether it's the current department or any new economic development organization, be improved. As an alternative, one of the questions is, should Bowie evaluate and consider exploring the interest in forming a regional EDO, even if it crosses county boundaries? And that is also a trend that's happened. You know, there's a saying, the only one who recognizes political boundaries are politicians and map makers. I can tell you that the people that you're trying to work with in the private sector, they look at markets. They don't necessarily look at political boundaries. So I think that's something that should be looked at. Why legal structures matter? Form follows function. The central theme of this report is simple. Form does follow function. The legal structure selected by the city, if, and that's, I want to underscore, if it decides to move forward, will determine governance, funding flexibility, accountability, partnership opportunities, and the ability to implement Bowie's economic development vision. Now, why structure matters? There's almost as many definitions of economic development success as there are political definitions. What will determine success for you? You've got to decide that. What will be your scorecard? How will you determine whether or not the current department or any private economic development organization is doing their job? Bowie's challenge is transitioning from theories, goals, and objectives to implementation. Economic developer, be they in government or nonprofits, face growing pressure with limited budgets and resources. I understand you had a challenging budget session this year. Budgets are going to be critical, whether it's with the city or whether it's with a nonprofit, in developing the resources to move forward. Communities leaders must consolidate efforts across elected officials, business, civic, and academic leaders. Public-private partnerships can plan and implement expensive, complex projects, and they can do that sort of in partnership with the governmental entity. PPPs reduce timelines, share development risks, and let the public sector focus on environmental, political, and permitting issues. The concept here is let the government do what they do best, and then come within the private sector and other partnerships to do those other kinds of things that they can do well. This is from your strategic plan. The city wants to increase the number of non-residential taxpayers and the revenue they create to ultimately reduce the residential taxpayers' burden. That's probably the goal of every city, quite frankly. The question is, how do you accomplish that? How are you going to do that under the existing structure or any new structure? So let's look at those legal structural options that if you decide to move forward. There are two legal paths for a nonprofit EDO. Under the U.S. tax code, jurisdictions creating, private nonprofit EDOs usually choose between two models. The 501c3, which is basically charitable, public benefit nonprofit strength, and a 501c6, which is usually business league membership driven. Most chambers of commerce, for example, are 501c6s because they are developed through a business community and business membership. They do share some common themes, however. Both are federally tax-exempt nonprofits. Both must avoid private inurement, no personal financial benefit to insiders or members. Both can support business retention, recruitment, research, marketing, and strategic partnerships. The question will be, how will they go about doing that? And there's a difference between the two structures. Both require formal governance, annual tax filings, and disciplined financial controls. So there are similarities, obviously, legally between the two. Strength and limitations of a 501c3. It's a stronger fit for city-sponsored or city-aligned public-private partnerships. You're going to find that a lot of the economic development organizations that have grown out of a public entity are 501c3s. They're better positioned for grants, philanthropic support, and charitable fundraising. They're well-suited for workforce development, entrepreneurship, and inclusive strategic planning. They're easier to defend as serving the public interest and economic development priorities because they're not being driven by private sector business interests only. They have limitations. Their lobbying is limited. Political campaign intervention is prohibited. Some may see that as a strength, but it's listed as a weakness. They must avoid delivering excessive private benefit to individuals and firms. The board and staff must maintain a clearly documented public purpose, and the disproportionate public funding can lead to political interference. The old, he who has the gold makes the rules. And so if it's overly dependent upon the political process, they become just sort of a shadow of the public sector. 501c6. 501c6 is a strong platform for policy advocacy, legislative engagement, and investor planning, often preferred, as I said, by chambers of commerce, business coalitions seeking a unified public sector voice. It fits UDOs primarily interested in marketing, recruitment, retention, and expansion. That's not to say that a 501c3 can't do that. They do, but this is usually driven by private sector direction. It's a natural fit where the EDO is intended to be member-funded and membership-driven. Its limitations are it's less favorable for charitable giving and grants. It can be perceived as narrow and more business-centric than a more broad community benefit. And it's less comfortable as an initial structure for a municipal launch seeking a clear public-private partner. Now there's a hybrid model. And a hybrid model is that many successful EDOs, particularly more mature ones who have been in business for a while, have both in a coordinated leadership. The 501c3 typically functions as a companion foundation, the legal vehicle to solicit grants, and the 501c3 foundations can demonstrate community benefit. The 501c6 can carry advocacy, lobbying, membership-driven business agenda. Legal separation, however, between the two must be maintained, distinct governance, financing, and record-keeping between the two entities. They can't be blended. There has to be a firewall between the two, even though they're complementary organizations. National examples already operate this way. These are some of, I think, the high-performing ones. The Orlando Economic Development Partnership, the Miami-Dade Beacon Council, which I headed, and the Charlotte Regional Business Alliance. Both have that hybrid model. But it didn't happen overnight. Those hybrids developed over time. What's my recommendation? If, and again, I'll understand, if Bowie privatizes economic development, the recommended initial structure is a 501c3 nonprofit public-private partnership, a stronger launch platform for public accountability, grant compatibility, and direct municipal and county partnerships. I think ideally, once that is structured, and if it's up and running and successful, then a hybrid model could be developed down the road. Let me also add that I also recommend the 501c3 because I interviewed a lot of folks here in town, some of you as well, but I interviewed a lot of folks in the private sector. And there's not the appetite right now, I think, in the private sector to fund from the private sector a 501c6. So I think that can come later, but I think it's not something that you should do as the initial program. Now, how are comparable EDOs structured? I've listed some very high performance ones, some here locally as well. Now, one of our discussions that I had with the city manager, she said, well, none of these are really like Bowie. No, they're not, because each community is different. But I cite these because they have relevance to Bowie on the way they were funded, on the way they're structured, and quite frankly, the success that they've had. And I think there's some lessons that can be learned from each of these. And there's no need to reinvent the wheel to say, well, we're going to strike out and do it completely different than these organizations have. And I think how they're formed, the kind of leadership they've had, I think is important. Performance standards and close collaboration between public, private, civic, and academic sectors are important components in all of these organizations. Their examples of my own experience have been influenced the recommendations that I've really have presented and will be presenting to you tonight. Case studies. If you look at the actual report, you can see that I have extensive lists from these organizations that I've cited, their case studies, how they were formed, why they were formed, how they were studied, what problems they've had. And so as you go through this, I don't have time to go through this today, but if you read those case studies, I think it'll give you a good overview as to how these organizations were formed. The interesting overwhelming part of it is they've all come with the same crossroads that you're facing. You know, do we do this? Do we not do this? Do we combine the chambers and the economic development organization? Do we bring in the CDCs? How are these structured? And all these organizations have done it. So I think that is something that is important to look at. So a representative government model. I think that the current structure, Bowie has many economic development reports and studies. The challenge has never been ideas. One of the things that I did is I asked John to give me all of the reports that the Economic Development Organization had. And you had a stack like this. My next question is, how much of it has been implemented? Very little, if any. And so that's very telling. You've got excellent reports. You've got lots of excellent recommendations. Your strategic plan that was done in a few years ago has many good recommendations. Some of them, quite frankly, I question, but a lot of it just, you know, in our business, it's a dust collector. A lot of reports become dust collectors. You hire somebody like me to come in, we give you a report, you say, yeah, thank you very much, and that's the last, it sees the light of day. So I think that it needs to have that kind of looking at, can this new organization, if we decide to go forward, provide the vehicle to implement the things that we know need to be done. Now, here's a proposed governance model for Bowie. If you were to create a private nonprofit, this is you called yourself mayor, and I appreciate what you said, the board of directors. Well, here's the board of directors of a nonprofit. City appoints 2 to 3 seats. Private sector executives, 3 to 4, brings market knowledge, investor credibility, business development perspective. Commercial real estate, if you're going to get into the economic development business, you have people who have experience in that. Financial legal accounting expertise, very important. How do you raise money? How do you oversee it to make sure that you're meeting that criteria? And here's one that I'm very strong on, Bowie State University. Links workforce and entrepreneurial goals, formal working relationships. You've got to have a better linkage with Bowie State University. My belief is the foundation of any good economic development program starts and is built upon education. You need a skilled, trained, educated workforce. But it also gives you the opportunity to tap in the expertise that the university has. You have new ideas coming out. You have students there. You have faculty always doing research. And it's right at your doorstep, and you should use it. You need small business entrepreneurship, keeps the organization grounded in local small business needs. And a lot of what you have here are small businesses. And at-large civic community leadership reinforces public legitimacy, and consider, for example, a seat for Old Town. Governance, safeguards, and accountability. Any new organization, and that's why I said this is not going to be easy, it needs formal bylaws, and I gave you a set of some sample bylaws in the report that I gave you. Conflict of interest policy, annual disclosure requirements, a clear statement that the nonprofit serves the city broadly, not the individual firms that sit on its board. An annual work plan and budget approved by the board, reviewed by city leadership. Performance KPIs, key performance indicators, tied to measurable outcomes, business retention, redevelopment progress, and job creation. What's the scorecard? How do you measure success? And then you got to report that success or not, but it's very telling as to how you evaluate whether to go forward. You're going to have a defined service agreement contract or MOU with the city to avoid duplication with existing departments, and a multi-year funding contract with the city that includes an annual review. If you're going to do this, my recommendation is that you develop at least a 3-year funding agreement. Otherwise, it's going to be jerked around through the political process. It's not to say you don't review them yearly, and if they're not performing, you can hold them accountable, but a 1-year, it really, you might as well not do it if that's the route you're going to do. Staffing, funding, and budget. This is a sample organizational structure. What I think is minimum staff for a launch. If this is going to be a successful organization, you need an executive director, president, leads the daily operations, staffing, goals, partnerships, fundraising, board support. Business development, recruitment, project management, external marketing, site and prospect support, business retention and expansion. I'm going to talk a little bit about BRE program, research and strategic initiatives. One of the things that I find a lot of economic development organizations missing is research. And that's where the university can be helpful as well. How do you target your prospects? How do you look at what's happening in the economy? So when I had an economic development, I had 2 economists on staff, and we constantly were monitoring what was going on. Marketing, communication, and fundraising, and a business manager. You need a CFO because it's going to be independent. It's going to have its own finances. Its first-year program of work, there are 6 priorities. The organizational launch. Incorporation, bylaws, you have to have an IRS application, board appointments, banking, accounting controls, a possible Old Town CDC merger, and a multi-year sitting agreement. That has to all be accomplished before you actually launch the organization. You need to develop a structured BRE visitation program with issue tracking and response protocols. Priority project support. You need to coordinate with city staff and the brokerage community on what your agenda should be. Bowie State University, again, I've already mentioned that. I think that's a critical component. Marketing and place marketing support. It's twofold agenda. You've got to market the new economic development organization because people got to know it's there, what they do, how to access it, how to use it. But also, you've got to elevate Bowie's profile regionally and statewide. And funding and partnerships to build a diversified support plan that combines city funding, sponsorships, grants, and selected private donations. You need to start with a manageable work program the first year of the organization, tied to the city's top priorities. And you need to have some early wins to show that this project can be successful. Otherwise, people are going to say it's the same old, same old. You need an organizational launch, diversified funding plan. Financial support will not happen immediately. It'll build momentum as the EDO establishes a track record of accomplishments. One of the things I heard from your private sector here was, I don't know. Well, we'll have to see what happens. Will it be successful? How will it help me? I think they'd be willing to open up their pocketbooks if they felt it would benefit their ultimate goals within the private sector. And again, I recommend a 3-year funding plan because I think that's very important. Business retention and expansion. This should become a core responsibility of any new PPP. Existing businesses are Bowie's strongest economic asset, and helping them grow should be a daily priority. Why BRE comes first. 65 to 70% of all jobs are created locally. You don't have to recruit them, they're already here. A structured business retention and expansion plan is imperative, but not just surveys. A lot of people say, well, we'll survey them. That's not enough. But you need deep, direct engagement, and it's often the highest return an economic development strategy can have by having a structured program. You need an early warning of potential relocation and closure. Usually by the time government hears through official channels, it's too late to change the outcome. You need a direct, proactive contact with local employers before relocation or expansion decisions are finalized. You know, you may have a company that says, I'm thinking of expanding, but I need this, or I may need that kind of help. And that's where you can become very directly involved. You can also act as an intermediary with government agencies or regulations before it escalates, and track competitive recruitment threats from other locales and respond to Warrant Act notices quickly. This is something for the mayor here. I'm recommending that you have a mayor's visitation program. Now, why is it called the mayor? Because you know what? I was a councilman, but I also was a mayor. And you know what? People want to meet with the mayor. But the councilman should also participate. And it should be accompanied by the EDO's CEO, may include a district council member, if that is in your district. And it's a twofer, but it's no press, no PR, all discussions confidential. And why it matters, because it's a candid channel to surface any pending business concerns. It'll be very rare for a business person to come up here at a podium and say, well, you know, this is what's not going to happen. They're just going to move, or they're just going to leave. But in a private meeting where they know it's not going to get out, they'll tell you the truth, usually. It's a direct opportunity for elected officials to also express appreciation. Because people say, well, suppose they're not leaving or they're not expanding. Nothing wrong with telling a business, you know what, I'm glad you're here. You know, I'm glad that you're here in Bowie and that you have your business here, particularly the small businesses. May include time to meet with employees when appropriate. I like to tell some of my political brethren, it's good government, but it's good politics, because you also have a face-to-face, not only with the owners or the directors or the CEOs of those businesses, but often the employees know, you know what, my councilman was here, the mayor was here. They care about my job. They care about my community. And it reinforces, and this is one thing that I used the brand, you can call it whatever you want, but I always used to use local business, local jobs, because that's really what it is. Strategic redevelopment priorities. Let's talk about Old Town for a second. I was very struck when I got to visit Old Town. One of the things that you ought to consider is merging the Old Town CDC into a new 501c3 if that structure is adopted. And I talked to the director of the CDC and said, would you be open to that? And very strategically said, well, it depends. And it does depend. But that way, they're working in unison with each other. I think you need to launch a business and arts initiative focused on the Old Town District if you do with the new EDO. One of the things I found successful is to survey local business and residents on support of the arts as an economic development, not just a civic asset. The arts are economic development. I can tell you one of the biggest things we ever did in Miami-Dade County was we went after a art show, and it became very successful. And what we found out is more private jets now come to Miami for Art Basel every year than come to a Super Bowl or came to the World Cup. Why? Because you're creating something that is different from what, the formal. Arts can be very, very influential. And I think that the Old Town lends itself to a preservation-oriented approach, protect the historic character while attracting artists, retail, and restaurants, invest in public spaces for social interaction, civic gathering, and arts events that reflect how the railroad shaped the city. Old Town models. There's some excellent ones out there, but I suggest if you want to go to this track, look at Santa Fe and Taos, New Mexico. They're the platinum standard, but they started small. They started like Old Town was, and they've been very, very successful. And they show how arts and culture drive tourism, hospitality growth, fuel restaurant and retail expansion, support historic preservation, and Bowie's goal is to become the state's most historic, authentic arts district. That would be a great goal, and I think, quite frankly, you could accomplish it. The EDA's role is to protect that through preservation, invest in museums, public spaces, support festivals, galleries, district promotion, allow zoning that combines artists, residential with studio gallery space. That's something that's been very important to a lot of folks because artists, starving artists, they need a place to live. They need a place to do their work. What a great, let them be in the same spot. And follow, one of the areas that I would say for this investment partnership is to look at the New Brunswick Development Corporation, which started as a very small entity with less than $100,000 in the city of New Brunswick. Today, several decades later, they have $20 million in the bank. They don't owe anybody, and they use the arts. The first things that we did was created performing arts centers because we knew it would be attraction. Bowie Town Center. Town Center has strong retail infrastructure, regional access, but lacks the on-site residential population to sustain upgraded retail and restaurants. I'm concerned about the town center. I'm concerned because retail is shrinking. It's shrinking nationwide. And if you lose one of your major retail operations, let's take Macy's as an example, which has closed a lot of facilities, that can start a cascade that won't end. It's a domino effect. You're going to need to have some kind of residential component there. There are a lot of communities that have similar layouts as the Bowie Town Center, but what they have that you don't have is residential. And I think that there are some models to look at. Coconut Point in Florida, the Mercado in Florida, City Center in Houston, City Center at Oyster Point in Virginia. They all have the component of having residential there. And they need to implement a mixed-use overlay district parking strategy, streetscape, pedestrian improvements. I mean, John told me today that some of the folks are getting together to try and fix potholes. Shouldn't have potholes if you're trying to attract the kind of retail that you want. Marketing and stakeholder engagement. The building a Bowie brand. Your 22 strategic plan found that the city lacks a strong modern brand and sense of place, and its external marketing to business is limited. What is your brand? How do people know you? I maintain they don't. I have a lot of associates in this area. And when I talk about Bowie, there's so many misconceptions they have about your city. They have misconceptions about your per capita income, the kind of community that you have, the kind of housing stock that you have, but you're not on the radar screen. One of the goals is we want to attract upscale retail. It doesn't happen by magic and smoke and mirrors. You need to be in front of the decision makers, be they site selectors, people that we are very familiar with, or the actual CEOs. I mean, when I started in trying to attract, I would send them a package every week, not brochures, not, glossies, but things about the city, and package it in a way that is creative. So they finally say, who is this guy? Who are they? I mean, so when we were trying to build a Hyatt hotel in New Brunswick, our marketing study said the best that we could hope for was a 75-room O'Connell Lodge, because at the time, we couldn't support anything. New Brunswick was in a state of disrepair. So we got one of our corporate partners, and he set a plane to Chicago, contacted Mr. Pritzker and said, we're going to leave that plane on the runway until you come see our city. And when he came and he said, well, what's your marketing study say? I was charged as the junior person to say, oh, I forgot it, Mr. Pritzker, I don't have it. And the chairman of our board said, oh, these young guys, they really don't know what they're doing. Frank, what size hotel did the marketing report say we should do? Now, I looked up at the ceiling, had no idea. It said 300, and that's what we built. We built a 300-room hotel. Hyatt still bears that flag today. Now, I'm not saying that's analogous to what you can do, but it's an example that you've got to get on people's radar screen. Marketing must work on two fronts, marketing the EDO and marketing the city. Your marketing budget is non-existent. I tell people, what was the difference between RC Cola and Coca-Cola? Marketing. It's still cola. To me, they taste basically the same. So the brand message must stay consistent while flexing different targeted markets and audience. The EDO should be branded as a resource for people and residents for what Bowie wants to do. You want to have them live, work, play, dine, and shop. Isn't that your goals? So how do you do that? How do you market that? How do you get that information out to the people who are going to be making the decision? It's not going to happen by fate. Telling the Bowie story. Co-sponsorships, matching fund programs, foundation grants. The approach should be editorial placement. Earned media outperforms paid advertising on a limited budget. I don't know how many economic development organizations I've worked with. The first thing, we're going to do ads. You got a $2 or $3 million budget to do those ads? Because unless you have that kind of budget with repetition to get those ads and where they're going to be seen, you're throwing money down the drain. So the best way is earned media, and you can do that. Social media supplements the effort, but it doesn't replace it. A dedicated PR firm, experience in place marketing is essential. And there are PR firms that do nothing else but promote communities. And they can get you in the paper. They can talk about Bowie. You can get articles. And guess what? Most of the people who make the decisions, where do they get their information from? Media that they read. So encourage Bowie leadership directly with key markets and prospects. Here, I think, are the most cost-effective techniques in priority order. PR, targeted marketing, trade publications, internet websites, social media, direct mail, publicity, telemarketing, planned visits to executive and site selectors. You got to get on the road. You got to tell your story. Mayor, councilman, you got to go meet with some folks. You got to go meet with editors. And, you know, and they will listen to you, and you'll be able to start to plant the flag of what Bowie is. Fan tours. Invite them here. Invite those publications here to see your city. I was very impressed when I took the tour. I told John, I said, take me to your worst area. I come from Jersey. We have some pretty bad areas. And he took me and I said, so where's the bad area? He goes, well, this is like, I said, man, this is far from a bad, but people need to see your city. Bring them down, invite them. Paid media, and the last is advertising. Advertising in many ways is doing, now it makes the politicians feel good. I had some people say, well, Mr. Nero, we're giving you all this money for, marketing, and I don't see any of those ads. And I would say, thank God, because I'm not marketing to you. I'm marketing to the other folks that we're trying to attract. One of the things that I think you can do is create a Bowie Economic Summit. I would call it Economic Summit for Bowie, a blueprint for our city's economic future. The goal is to engage the full community in shaping economic development priorities and to validate and update the 22 Strategic Action Plan. You've got a report. Do you agree with it? Don't you agree with it? Does the community support it? Don't they support it? How do you get people involved? One of the things that I found is these summits gets people's juices flowing. Now, you can do it in a variety of ways. It can be all come, and where you have an open and you have structured seminars and things, or it can be by invitation, where you invite certain key stakeholders and decision makers. It's an opportunity also for the new mayor to set an economic development priorities from day one. You have a new city manager, you have a new mayor, you have a new council person. What better way to try and get an agenda by reaching out to the community? They'll tell you what your agenda is. You have to listen to it and then implement it. I recommend that it be hosted at Bowie State University, because you got to get them involved, with faculty and students serving as facilitators and panelists. Workshops should sharpen the 22 plan, including a hard look at ROI on niche ideas like athletic tourism. I don't know if that's really going to give you the ROI that you want. It's in that strategic plan, but that's one that is going to have to be evaluated. And it can also double as a launch for the new EDO, implementation and performance. These are the phases. I'm not going to go through all of these in detail, but as you can see, if you decide to go the public-private partnership way, this is how long it's going to take you. It's going to take you at least a year to transition between what you have now and what hopefully a new economic development organization has. And this basically, I've outlined it, what those phases are and what you should be accomplishing within 60 days, 120 days, 4 to 6 months, 12 months, period. Performance metrics. You need a quarterly KPI dashboard. Projects that are completed and rate of completion. Number of active projects, new capital investment. What projects are going on in Old Town and the town center? What's the economic impact of indirect and direct jobs? How many BRE visits and trade show missions have attended? And as for business retention and expansion, every staff member should have a designated number of visitations. Not just the mayor, not just the head, but every staff member should be out visiting businesses. I used to tell my staff, there are no jobs in the office. They're out there, and that's where you need to be if you're going to be in this business. I propose that you should have a report to the community published each year, posted on the city EDO website, and it should be presented at a community event. And that can be excruciating sometimes when you have to stand up and say, well, we only met 20% of our goal. But it holds you accountable. And it holds and say, this is what we're doing. This is what we're working on. This is where we're going. But it engages a community, and it anchors credibility and accountability to residents. Conclusions. Launch the 50, if you decide this is the route you want to go, and I always have to do that, as a nonprofit public-private partnership, the strongest initial platform for a municipal EDO. Evaluate a companion 501c6 once a record of achievement is accomplished. Why this structure? Fund a new nonprofit at least current department levels with a minimum 3-year funding agreement. If you think an economic development organization is going to be cheaper and you can save money from what you're spending now, don't do it, because you won't have the resources that you're going to need to implement it. Consider a dedicated private sector funding source or a business tax or a bid type mechanism if permissible under Maryland law. My organization, for example, was funded in part, but they put a surcharge on the occupational license fee. Now they call it the local business tax, but we got a percentage of it. So we knew there was a dedicated funding source, and then we augmented that with other kinds of resources. Mirrors ready, Montgomery County, Prince George's models, already proven in Maryland, and they are 501c3s. Does not foreclose a future 501c6, and Bowie can add that once investor arm is justified. What are the next steps? I think that you need to appoint a task force to review this report's findings and recommendations. I see that the staff said, we don't recommend it at this time. Well, what is the right time? But I think, and it's not the Economic Development Committee that exists already. Why? Because they're going to say, let's keep it like it is. I think you need to, if you look at the structure of the board that I recommended and the kind of membership, that really should be mirror what the committee should look like. So you have a broad cross-section of the community. Decide whether to retain the government structure or establish a private partnership. If proceeding, confirm the 501c structure and authorize phase 1. Again, authorize funding and avoid and host a economic development summit at Bowie. Now, how you do this, you can have the summit first, and out of that say, okay, from that summit, we'll now have this committee and we'll evaluate it based upon what you hear from the community, or have the committee task force say, no, let's look at this and then lay that out as items to be discussed at the summit. You can do it either way, whatever works you think best for the community. Here's the economic development organization structure that I've recommended. You can see that budget minimum. It's not, again, it's not cheap. I think the 3-year budget, you're talking that kind of a commitment, but I would strongly recommend that there be set aside at least $250,000 a year for marketing, because you need to raise the profile of this community. People need to know who you are, or you're never going to accomplish your goals. This is a great community that nobody knows about. Nobody outside of this area that you're trying to attract. Those decision makers who are heads of corporations, location and site consultants. One of the telling things that you can do, and you can get a survey, I'm sure the county economic development has it, a list of location consultants. Send them a survey of what they know and what they think about Bowie. You're going to be very surprised at what you get back. You may not be happy with what you get back, but it will tell you what the challenges are. So, questions and discussions, thank you for giving me this much time. If you ever need some others, I basically was retired when John pulled me out of retirement. And my wife now says, now that this is over, you can go back to retirement. But, economic development started in my blood. I've been doing this for sort of 55 years. So it's sort of like the firehouse dog. When he smells the smoke, he wants to get off and running. And that's sort of where I've been. So I'll take any questions that any of you have about the recommendations, thoughts, ideas, what you agree with, what you disagree with. I'm at your command.
Thank you, Mr. Nero. It was very thorough. I'm going to turn this over to staff because there's anything they want to jump in with as far as framing. We're receiving a report tonight. We can ask all the questions we want. What I'm going to recommend is that regardless of the conversation, we have a work session in the near future where we sit down, kind of review this after we have some time to process it. We also received a really detailed report from our EDC that kind of didn't get a lot of discussion earlier in the year. I think it'd be good to digest that as well at a work session because they cover some overlapping topics, but some different things. And we can have kind of a broader conversation. So just a heads up that that's going to be, I think, the direction we ought to head. Staff, anything before I jump in with council questions? Nope. Feeling good? Great. I will start on my left with anyone who has anything. I'll go over to my right. Mr. Nero was so thorough. You preempted and addressed all of it. All right. Second call on my right. I got Ms. All right, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. Thank you for being here with this evening. A couple of general questions for you. Your discussions, you spent a lot of time discussing about the relative merits of the 501c3 and 6 and so forth like that. Ultimately, though, it seems that that presupposes that we should do it, right? And so the question I have for you is whether or not this is suitable for us. I mean, I think you spoke with a lot of people. For me, economic development, the two big things are Old Town Bowie and Bowie Town Center. And so my ask is, great, I go and put together a EDC, set up, wait a year for it to get up and running, spend a couple of million, $2.5 million bucks a year, whatever it is. I think I only get about $500,000 in property tax revenue from my businesses, so I'm already underwater there. And so I'm looking at this going like, all right, is it going to work? And, you know, what will, you know, how much can I expect to get out of this from, you know, my time, energy, and effort on this?
That's a good question. And I think the reason why I've said a 501c3 is because a 501c3 can actually work as a development entity and can partner with private sector developers for investment. I also think that by creating a board, and again, you don't have to wait the whole year. You know, as you're doing this and transitioning, some of these recommendations can be implemented through your economic development department that you have. It's not mutually exclusive. One of the things that I think is also the reason why I think if you decide to do this, and again, I keep saying, if you decide this is a route you want to go to privatize, you're going to need some, I think, some additional firepower. The number one issue I heard from your private sector folks was permitting and zoning. They were like beside themselves. And I know that's on a county basis. But now you're government to government and trying to get that, move that boulder. One of the things that a 501c3 does with a strong board, and you should have a strong board, is that you can create the kind of firepower and support to deal with the county to maybe get a memorandum of agreement on your zoning and permitting side. So it does have that additional component of not just, and I don't want to deprecate it, of saying just an economic development department, but many times that's how it's viewed. It's another government entity. You know, other municipalities get in line. And I think that it doesn't give you the kind of firepower that you really should have here. And I think also the kind of expertise that you could get in developing a 501c3. But I think that, and again, I'll use, and I said this to the city manager today, one of the areas that I suggest that you look at, maybe even visit, is go to New Brunswick, New Jersey, and meet with the head of the development corporation there and look at the progress as to what happened to a community. Now, that's where Rutgers University is located. Rutgers was having a problem because they couldn't get students to go because the city was in such bad shape. Their corporate entity, now, I'm not saying that Bowie has the same thing. You don't have a Johnson & Johnson here. But they were getting ready to leave because They couldn't get people to work there. The city, you didn't walk down the street after 6 o'clock at night. So they came up with this idea that they would do New Brunswick tomorrow, where they would develop all these grand plans of what they wanted to do. And they thought the developers would come flocking and they would rebuild the city. You know how many developers came? None. Zero. So what did they say? They did. Leadership said, we'll be the developer. So they created a 501c3. They met with the banks, they met with the financial people, and they started small. They started very, very small to try and say success is coming. And I think that can be the case with Old Town. Old Town, I think, can be a gem for this community. Now, if you do the same thing through your department, fine, as long as you have the success. But the old definition of, insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. You've been doing the same thing for years. You've got tremendous reports. How many have been implemented? Almost like New Brunswick, zero. So what's different? Sometimes just the new entity is what's different, and it gets things going to be implemented. But that's going to be your call. That's a policy decision that you all in a workshop and ultimately are going to have to make that decision.
Well, it's interesting because from my standpoint, I don't have a Rutgers type problem, right? Which is I have some very specific areas that are not up to snuff or at risk of not becoming so. So I'm a little concerned that I'm, looking to swat flies with a sledgehammer, right? I mean, I don't want to make it sound like I'm going to build this big infrastructure. What I really want is to redevelop my town center and Old Town Bowie, and then help out with some of the other areas as well, but not, I mean, this is not a complete, gut job here, right? I mean.
No, I agree. Look, the town center, now you have multiple owners, which is going to complicate it. I mean, one of the things that I think, again, a 501c3 can do that a government can't do is you can partner with them. They can literally be a development partner with those entities, and you pick them off one at a time. At the same time, looking at an overall plan, you're going to need, I think you're going to have some kind of residential component at town center. Otherwise, I see a flashing red light that is caution, because just a standalone retail, I mean, when I was here the last time, it was a weekday night, and I decided I would go walk around and see. It was a ghost town. That's not a good omen. And so I think, and the other side of that is that one of the things that the report, the whole report, the volume, says one of the priority areas is, it doesn't rain in every area. So investment doesn't go in every area. So what are the priorities? The areas where it isn't raining as much. And, town center is a concern, all towns are concerned, and there may be other areas within the community that should direct that attention to say, this is what we need to do here. And it's going to be different for each area. It's not all going to be the same. So, I think that it's not going to be overnight success. But I think as you begin this transition, that's why I said you need to look at the transition from where you are now to where you're going to be. You don't have to wait for it to happen. You don't have to wait a year. Once you decide this is what our priorities are, you can start to do that immediately. And I think one of the things is to get the community behind you. And how do you do that? That's why I think an economic development community summit, convocate, whatever you want to call it, but bring the community in and say, here are the challenges, here are the priorities, what kind of support is out there to do what you need to do. And I think that's very important.
One last comment. I'm a little concerned about your emphasis on Bowie State. And the reason I am is because they have a big project of their own, which is going to be going on north of their campus, and which they're extensively involved in. I'm not sure they got time for little old me And I'm not sure what, for example, interest they would bring to Bowie, for the concern about Bowie Town Center, or say, other shopping areas in District 4, maybe Old Bowie, they might have some interest, but I got to believe they're going to be pretty parochial and say, hey, look, job one is, my kid and my family's, right? And they got their family up there that they're going to be taking care of with all their development projects. I'm not sure that we would get much out of a partnership with them, in large part, not because they, are bad people or anything. It's just that I think they got bigger priorities. Now, we haven't spoken to them about it, of course, but I don't know how thin they want to spread their jam,
Well, there's one way to find out, and that's to ask them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And, and my point would be, what they say, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step.
Mm-hmm.
You got to get them engaged.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you have a university here with students that can be interns, that students can do research for you, that professors that are out there probably doing some of this stuff, who have economists there that you can tap into. Maybe it's not the administrative side. Maybe it's, I'm sure they have a faculty senate, maybe you get them engaged.
Mm-hmm.
But there are ways to do that. In the community in Miami-Dade, we had the University of Miami, we had FIU, we had Barry University, and Miami-Dade Community College, the largest in the country. They weren't even speaking to each other, let alone working with little old us. So we created an academic leaders conference. And we put them together at the table and said, look, you've got a vested interest here, because if this community goes down, your students, back to the Rutgers issue, enrollment dropping, people not wanting to go there, et cetera, et cetera. So I understand what you're saying, and sometimes it's not easy to get academia involved. But to some level, you've got to reach out to them, I think.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Wolfley. Councilmember Rogers.
Thank you, and thank you for your presentation. I told you when I talked to you on the phone, you gave me hope.
Yes.
I appreciate that. So we may not be at Rutgers, and I'm a Jersey girl. I went to college in Lawrenceville, right down the road. We may not have a Rutgers problem, or we may be myopic in our review and believe that we don't, but I will just say this much about Bowie State. It is a gem that the city of Bowie has not tapped into. Bowie State actually buses students all the way to College Park to stay in hotels because there's not enough space on campus. They didn't come to Bowie because they don't have the relationship with Bowie, and they need to have the relationship with Bowie. So some of your research that you've done that says that people don't really understand Bowie, if we go out and we do a survey, that's the reason why, because we're very insular. And we really need to start thinking a bit broader about our implications and impacts, because even the development that's going on over in Bowie State will impact the city of Bowie, because it's right across the street, right across the highway. And I think the impact will be positive for Old Town Bowie for sure, because it's right there, and any type of shopping or homes up that 197 corridor. We really have to think broader, and we have to think about the future. So I do believe that Bowie State should be a part of our future, and we should have that relationship. I know when I first came on council, me, Councilman Brady, and Truesdale all went over to Bowie State to speak to the president. And I also know the president was like, oh no, I'm not going to deal with Bowie, but I had a subsequent meeting with someone from the faculty senate who was shocked that the president was not looking to do more with Bowie, because just like you said, we could do interns and everything else. So anyway, let me just go on. I just wanted to mention a couple things. So thank you for your presentation again. I really appreciated it. What I want is I just want to clarify that when you talk about the EDO in your presentation, that really is the Economic Development Corporation.
Yes.
And it could be a separate organization than what we already have in
Yes.
place now.
Yes.
Okay, so I want to
It'd be a separate standing private nonprofit.
Got you. All right. So I want to clarify that as I go back and do my research and be prepared for my work group meeting. An economic development corporation is, and let me preface this with, I was one of the past presidents of the Bowie Chamber of Commerce, so I just have my tentacles out there when it comes to business. So the Economic Development Corporation, we can use it for business recruitment and retention, the redevelopment of commercial corridors, small business support, workforce development, marketing to community investors, bless you, and securing grants and public-private partnership donations. The ecosystem that you addressed, I just want to talk a little bit about that. You talked about bringing in Bowie State, the Bowie Chamber. I think you may have talked to, if not, the Bowie Business Innovation Center and the Maryland Women's Business Program, which are both incubator initiatives, could come into that. And then we also have workforce development, where we've created a separate little entity over in our Kent Hill Shopping Center that could also help with preparing workers for jobs here in the greater Bowie area. So, and I also heard you talk about regional economic development corporations. And you believe that we should focus on regional as well?
Only if there can not be the kind of relationship and productivity from the Prince George County Economic Development Corporation. Because to basically say, well, we just can't get what we need, or they're not doing the kind of things that helps Bowie, well, if you keep saying that over and over, then nothing happens.
Right.
So I think the alternative is, well, then look regionally, because that could also be a benefit. And a lot of the economic development organizations are now regional. Mm-hmm. And they cross county lines and they cross jurisdiction because they're looking more at markets as opposed to boundaries. Now, you know, as someone who is involved with the chamber, one of the things that could happen if you decide down the road to look at a 501c6, which has a chamber model, that could be encompassing with the chamber. For example, one of the most successful, I think, economic development organizations, and I say this because it's not the one that I used to head, is Orlando. Because what Orlando did, and Charlotte's done it as well, and if you look at the case studies, they combined their economic development organization and their chambers together. Chambers still had the chamber functions, and the EDO still had their, but they worked in synergy with each other, and they were under the same umbrella. Some of the organizations that you just mentioned could also be under the umbrella of an economic, of a new EDO. Mm-hmm. So they can be under that same roof, and therefore they're working in concert with each other as opposed to in silos. And the worst thing that can happen in an economic development capacity is you have group over here, a group over here, a group over here, and yet there's not the cross-fertilization, so to speak, that you can get if they're all under the same roof.
Okay. And I just have a couple more comments and I'll be finished. So when I did some research on the Prince George's County Economic Development Corporation, I found that they were funded, 80% of their funding was coming from the county. But a lot of that funding was used to help support other businesses to training or grants, because they also raised money by hosting events, doing things that would help them get funds, such as grants and things of that sort. So I am concerned about funding because as you know, the city of Bowie, we're trying to, take care of a structural deficit. Now, what are your thoughts on, how we can proceed with funding?
Well, I think, when I looked at it, again, you have new leadership. So, I looked at prior to the leadership that you have now. But I didn't see any kind of recruitment efforts. I didn't see really outward marketing. A lot of the organizations have stopped doing the Events Are Us because that's just sort of internal opportunity, but it's not reaching out to get the kind of investment that places like Bowie is looking for. How many retail, folks do they do? Do they go to the retail trade shows to try and recruit it? The answer is no. Mm-hmm. But they should. So I think that the way, and I've looked at their budget, and the way their budgets are structured, they've caught the trap of Events Are Us. Now, I talked to the new president, and she was saying, she basically agreed and said, it needs to be restructured. We really need to look at it. And so, but as an alternative, that's why I said if that doesn't work, then maybe look regionally, because you need to have that firepower of a very vibrant, very successful economic development organization at the county level. And I think they can help support financially. I mean, you could do joint marketing. So maybe it's not the $250,000, but they're going to help put together the kind of marketing program that's going to meet the kind of goals that Bowie's looking to do. So, but you need to have that part of the agenda, and again, pressure, and you need to speak up and get that done, because you're not getting benefit of that today, I don't think, at least you were in the past.
Okay, and one more question,
Sure.
and anything else I'll bring up when we have our work group. One more question. You mentioned the Old Town CDC.
Yes.
Now, and you talk with somebody now. What is the Old Town CDC?
There's,
No, he's sitting right there.
Oh, that's Mark Lawrence? Yeah. Okay.
There's Mark.
All right. Right, there is a Huntington CDC out of Old Bowie. That's why I wasn't clear on that. Yeah. All right. Shh. All right. Other than that, I think I hit most of my questions and comments. Like I said, funding was a big deal because when we talk about these things, we got to figure out how we fund them. But I'm quite sure we'll work that out later. Thank you so very much.
You're welcome. And you should feel free to give me a call or email me. I mean, I'd be happy to, if you have specific questions that come up later, the contract may be over, but my engagement with you, pro bono would be to, I'd like to see you succeed. I mean, when I see this community, I said, this really, you're talking about a very special place, and yet you have some issues, and if I can help you do that, I'd be happy to do it.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Rogers. I know I got some questions on my left. I'll go to Councilmember Ndebu Madu, and I'm going to give Mayor Pro Tem the con for a second.
Thank you so much, Mayor Stev. Mr. Nero, thank you for your presentation. It was very insightful, detailed, and thorough. So I appreciate it. Before I start my remarks, let me just make one comment on the Bowie State. I'm going to echo off Councilmember Rogers. In my years of living, I've seen one trend. Typically, employers follow education. And if there isn't a sustainable partnership with the educational institutions in the areas, the employers do not care to be in that location. If you look at most of the redevelopment that has happened in a lot of jurisdictions that are similar to ours, it has always followed a couple of key trends that you've identified tonight. And those are the pieces that we are missing and we don't have in place. We do need to make it a priority on this body. We've talked about it a lot, but to have a broader and more intentional partnership with Bowie State University, it's vital. They've come to us a number of different times and presented on various initiatives, whether that is their innovation ecosystem, their entrepreneurship center. They have so many different programs that can be meaningful to us that will help us attract employer-led tax base growth, which is what we're after. Because it doesn't really matter if we can retain restaurants and we can retain small businesses if you have no high-paying jobs for people to patronize those small businesses and restaurants with. And so that's the comment I'll make on Bowie State. The other thing I'll say on Bowie State is part of the reason why their development is booming and Bowie is not a part of it is because of that lack of partnership. They're getting funding from the state, the federal government, as well as different entities, nonprofit entities, and that funding is impacting us, but yet we're reaping no benefit from it because we don't have a partnership. So then when we turn around and ask for funding, a lot of people look at us like, well, we just gave Bowie funding because we gave it to Bowie State when Bowie was not even in that conversation. And so there's a mismatch and a misconception that we have around what employers are actually looking for. And when I say employers, I mean employers that are going to sustain the type of tax base that our residents are used to. And I speak on behalf of District 4 because in District 4, we have a great thriving base of tax dollars that come to the city of Bowie that I am never looking at, but that sustain a certain quality of life, and we have to be ready to provide jobs that help sustain that quality of life. So that's my comment in regards to Bowie State University. The other things that I'll go into for your presentation, I really appreciate it. You've provided a lot of consideration, a lot of thoughts on how an economic development implementation framework can look like and what we might need to do. There are a couple of points that I thought were interesting, and then I do have a couple of questions. I do align with you that a 501c3 private corporation is probably the best route. You mentioned that when you met with a couple of business owners, they mentioned that 501c6 is not, it probably isn't the best for us right now, because for them, I think we have a lot of business partners that are willing to invest in the city of Bowie, but we haven't been clear on what that ROI is for them. So I don't blame them for wanting to see results and wanting to see a cohesive vision that's very direct and that has an ROI attached to it that makes sense for them to put their money behind it because they're business people at the end of the day. So I do align with your recommendations on a 501c3. I also think part of the reason why we've even approached on this point in time is because we have a challenge as a municipality from turning identified opportunity into structured execution. We don't have the capacity to be agile on deal making, place making, advertising, marketing, and all of, you name it. We just don't have that capacity as a municipality. So that's part of the reason why a lot of this work even came up in the first place, because as you know, private markets move very fast, and we're often on the tail end and the receiving end and the reactive end of what private markets have already decided. And so I think this particular structure, as we discuss it more in our work session, is going to be very helpful when it comes to speed to execution, because there are a lot of people, if you take the CDC in Old Town Bowie, for example, they're able to do things at a quicker turnaround rate. They're able to identify things because they're out in the community. They're constantly meeting with the corporations. They're constantly meeting with the educational partners. They're constantly meeting with the small businesses around them. And those are things that we just don't have the capacity to execute on. So I definitely agree that this would be very helpful for us to move forward when it comes to structured execution and making sure that we can convert a lot of these advantages that we have in the city of Bowie into jobs, private investment, redevelopment, and a stronger non-residential tax base. Some of the things that stood out to me in your presentation were permitting. You brought up that permitting is a challenge, and I really wish as a body, it's not for you, but really as a body and just in general, we would stop talking about permitting, because obviously that is a county responsibility and there are ways that we can partner with the county, but that's not our holdup. Our holdup is that we don't have enough investment coming from the private sector into the city of Bowie. We're not clear about what it is that our identity is and what it is our brand is. The state of Maryland has been very clear in terms of our governor. The governor's priority is on Maryland's lighthouse industries. He is very clear on where the money is moving, what he wants the state of Maryland to be known for, and where they are putting their priorities. We have not once, at any point in time, decided to align with that. So therefore, no funding or investment comes to us because we are not in alignment with where the financial vehicles are flowing at the time. So therefore, this is our byproduct. So we get what our participation yields. So that's one thing. The other thing is we talk a lot about retention. I don't actually agree that our focus should be on retention. I think it needs to be on redevelopment. When we talk about redevelopment, we keep identifying 2 parcels as if those 2 parcels make up our 20 square miles. Yes, we have Bowie Town Center, and that's great. But the reality is Bowie Town Center's change is probably 5 to 10 years away from now. Then we talk about Old Town Bowie. I am not convinced that Old Town Bowie is going to turn into this big tourism destination because I'm not convinced that the constituents that live in Old Town Bowie are comfortable with that. So while yes, it can be wonderful, kind of like in Old Town Alexandria, if you're familiar with that, and it can be that. I think that's wonderful. But I don't think it's going to be the economic engine for the city of Bowie because I don't think that the constituents over there want that. And so what does that mean? That then means what are the other pockets of Bowie that we need to look at to have a cohesive plan on what it looks like to redevelop or revitalize all of Bowie as a city, not Bowie Town Center and Old Town Bowie, because those are not the only 2 locations in the city of Bowie. Then the second part is the alignment with everyone else. And just like what I love that you hit on was you talked about how in your career, you've seen people consistently reach out to industries and private sector corporations. I love that approach. That's amazing because how else would they know about the city of Bowie if we don't reach out? The only reason why we had a conversation with Trader Joe's at Bowie Town Center is because we emailed their CEO. That was the only reason why we had a conversation with Trader Joe's. Other than that, every municipality wants Trader Joe's. Of course they do. It's a great place. But if they don't know about you, you're not going to get them. And so I think that's part of what this nonprofit entity kind of can represent and can reflect is a structured kind of execution arm that can really do these things on our behalf and have the New York Times, the Wall Street Journals, the things out here really positioning Bowie and seeing it differently. And then I think the last thing you hit on before I go to my questions, a lot of areas got redeveloped because particular things had interest in those places. If you look at New Jersey, part of why Audible made the investment that they did in New Jersey is because their CEO is from there and he cared. He cared, so he said, okay, we're gonna keep Audible here. Even when Amazon purchased Audible, we're gonna keep it here and we're gonna invest in the surrounding areas because we want this to be different. We have a lot of notable people that come from Bowie. How many times have we ever reached out to any one of them? Never. We have an NBA player that has a farm here. Have we partnered with him? No, we haven't. And so there are certain things that we can be doing differently today to start to revitalize and kind of boost that economic arm that we're just not doing because we keep having this same conversation year after year. Okay, to my questions. Number 1, you have correctly identified Bowie's challenge is implementation. Can you define the specific authorities, capabilities, and operating functions the corporation would possess that our current department does not, particularly around capital structuring, developer negotiations, site assembly, external financing, institutional partnerships, and public-private transactions?
Well, I think you've hit on it. I mean, what I said before is I think you need to have government do what government does best, but a private sector-driven economic development organization, which this would be, with a board of directors, can address those. And it's who you hire, how you hire them, what their training is, and what resources and support they have to do the things that you've just identified. Government is not good at doing those things. I mean, it's not in their portfolio. And so when they do it, they either do it badly or don't do it at all. And therefore, you keep spinning your wheels. It's sort of, again, I go back to the myriad of reports that you have. I mean, I think that the Economic Development Department did a good job in identifying, the workshops and the reports and things that need to be done. But then what happens to them? They're not implemented. Why? Because it's not structured to do so. But your public-private partnership is structured, if it's structured correctly, to do that. And so I think that you've got to let the government do the kinds of, and that's why it's a partnership. That's also why I recommend a 501c3 initially, because you are all going to be partners with that entity. It's not like they're going to be out in space, never to be seen again. You're going to monitor that. You're going to, they're going to report to you. You're going to have contract with them. You're going to require certain results. And I think that's where this symbiotic relationship between the city is. And you're not necessarily always going to agree. You may not like some of the things they're doing. But I think that that's where the relationship comes. And the things that you said, prior to that are all true. I mean, that's exactly why I think in the case that you need an implementation entity that is geared to implement in a private sector mode that can operate fast, can look at the changing markets, know how to address those markets. And, again, when I was there, that's why I had economists on my staff. I wanted to know what was happening in the marketplace. I wanted to know how to do that, how to structure those deals. And you're never going to get the kind of investment that you want or redevelopment unless you're in front of the people who are going to make those decisions. And that's not happening right now.
Yeah.
No fault, because they don't have the tools or structure to do that.
Right. And
that's why you're looking at an alternative.
And it's also we're not incentivized that way. That's not the incentive structure. So it makes sense completely what you're saying. And I think another example before I get to my next question is when we talk about this particular corporation and we keep talking about the activity that's happening around Bowie State, we should be in those meetings with the Revenue Authority, those meetings with the county, those meetings with Bowie State. And it is very simple for some of that activity to then become economic drivers on the other side of Bowie. It's very easy, but we don't have that capacity, that implementation, that incentive structure to be in those meetings, to be driving those outcomes. And so I think that's a really great example of what you hit on. The next question I have for you is your report describes 7 staff functions as the minimum launch structure and recommends multi-year city funding. What do you see as the estimated annual operating cost? What existing city expenses or functions?
Well, if you look at that last chart.
Hold on, let me finish my question.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Functions would transfer to the corporation, and what leaner launch structure could demonstrate value before the city assumes the full reoccurring obligation?
Well, I think if it can't be funded, at least at the level that your current department is, you're giving them a formula for failure. The fact of the matter is that suggested staffing, I think, is a good launch, but ultimately it's minimal. But I think it'll put you in good stead. When I started to price out, what that budget would look like, and I put 2.4 million as a minimum structure, some of that is, well, what's the overhead going to be? Is there space that could be made available at no cost? Could be at the university, could be at an office park that maybe has some space that a developer is willing to donate for a year or so. So there are ways that cut that budget down, but at a minimum, you're going to need to have that kind of a structure. The reason why I said a multi-year funding, because, and again, I say this, having been in elected office, politics can always rear its head. And so all of a sudden, the budget of this entity becomes a ping pong ball. So if you have a 3-year commitment, you can hold their feet to the fire. And if they don't perform, you could change that budget, or you could cancel the contract. But they want to be able to know that you've got a 3-year window to incrementally achieve the kind of things that you, as the ultimate board of directors, want them to do. And so I think that that's why you need to have that contract. That contract needs to be very airtight, but it also has to have a funding component to it. And I think without that, then you're wasting your time. I mean, quite frankly.
Thank you for that response. The next question is, your report gives significant emphasis to Old Town Bowie and Bowie Town Center. What analysis supports making those two locations the primary focus of the corporation, and how would that emphasis advance the broader citywide goals of employment growth, private investment, institutional partnerships, redevelopment execution, and expansion of non-residential tax base?
Well, the easy answer is because that's what my contract asked me to do.
Gotcha.
So that's what I looked at.
I love it. Thank you. That's easy.
But the reality of it is, I think I said that before, it doesn't rain equally in all areas. So there's going to be other areas which need to be identified. And I sort of hedged my bet on that because there's clearly going to be other areas. And as I rode around, I saw them that need to have that. I've specifically addressed that because that's what I was asked to do.
Gotcha. Thank you for that clarity. And my last question is, how should the corporation position Bowie for employment generating investment in professional services, state contracting, innovation, and other sectors identified in the city's broader economic framework?
Well, I think that becomes what is the broader strategic plan and initiative that the city and this entity needs to do. That's also why I think you need the relationship with the university, because some of that is the foundation of what you're talking about. Again, there is no successful economic development organization that I know of in this country that doesn't have education as the foundation of their plan, period. Because if you don't have skilled, trained, and I started out in this world as a teacher, so that's sort of my, my hidden prejudice. But if you don't have that, you're not going to be successful, because you're not going to have the workforce. You're not going to have the jobs that these people can fill. And so what happens? You have flight. Kids go somewhere else. They get educated and they leave. And so without that kind of resource, you're not going to be able to have the customers for the retail you want, or the restaurant that you want, or the kind of other kinds of employment that you want, because you're not going to have the workforce to do it.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nero. My parting comments are, we appreciate your work. This has been insightful. On behalf of District 4, what I want to put out there for my colleagues before the work session, I get the focus on Bowie Town Center. I get the focus on Bowie, Old Town Bowie. However, I do want to be very clear about the inclusion of South Bowie. We have major transportation corridors in our area, and we are losing a lot of economic dollars because we do not focus on revitalizing that area. So I do want to make sure that I highlight that for my colleagues' consideration ahead of our work session, that we make sure that we activate areas that make sense, because every area kind of adds to that broader economic framework across the city.
And you will determine that if you create an economic development organization by the contract that you sign with them, because they'll have their marching orders as what you want them to do. Again, my marching orders were to look at those two areas, and that's what I did.
I appreciate you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councilmember. Thank you, Mr. Nero. Councilmember Truesdale.
Was you next?
We got Truesdale next.
All right, great. Thank you for your presentation. Some of these questions are going to be redundant.
It's okay.
But for the most part, I appreciate you coming tonight. You mentioned a lot about Rutgers and New Brunswick. What is the collaboration of those two entities?
Well, they were part of the initial planning. I mean, when we first started out, who sat at the table? Blaustein, who was president of Rutgers University, the head of the hospitals there. The chairman of the board of Johnson & Johnson was at the table. The mayor was at the table. They often fought like hell, quite frankly, but they ultimately came to a consensus as to who was going to do what. And on a smaller scale, and again, you're not New Brunswick, you're not Rutgers, you don't have Johnson & Johnson, but the lessons learned there in the process can be very similar. And that's why if you look at the structure that I recommended for this EDO, should you go that way, it's a cross-section of that. It's the university involved. It's the private sector involved. It's the CDC involved. It's, small business involved. So that everybody is at that table creating the kind of collaboration and moving forward. And they met regularly.
Okay.
And it started out with a planning, and as a matter of fact, you're further ahead than they ever were, because you have strategic plan, you have reports that have identified what the issues are with suggested ways to address it. You need to implement them.
So not to cut you off, because
No, that's okay.
we don't want to belong to Tom, but as a result, as a result of that meeting, what came out of that in terms of the relations
New
today?
Brunswick is looked on one of the premier cities in New Jersey. I went, and if you look at what's happened to that city, from housing to neighborhood improvements to they just created a new building that a center that is now going to be housed by various entities within the whole state of New Jersey. They, at one point, and I think I told this to John, when they first started out, they had $100,000 in the bank, and they thought they were going to go bankrupt the public-private corporation. Today, that corporation is $20 million in the bank and no debt. And they've become not only development partners in New Brunswick, but they've been so successful that Newark, New Jersey, and Atlantic City, New Jersey, has contracted with them to do development in those communities because of the fact they've seen the success. And one of the things I recommended to the city managers, go visit them.
Yeah.
Go. Talk to them.
The last time I went up there is always a bypass. That city and that university is always a bypass for me getting to New York, right? So I would have to stop.
They're redoing their train station, so stop.
Yeah. Just in terms of relations with Bowie State, right? And you speak of 501. When I hear that, especially as a business owner, I kind of I think of giving up autonomy in some type of way, right? And I know the collaborations and the results that it can have, which you mentioned this evening. But when you look at Bowie State and you say the EDO has different structures, you know, what fits Bowie may not fit, you know, somewhere else, or somewhere else vice versa. And so looking forward to this work session would be very important, I think, to all of us, getting the information. But going back to the autonomy, Bowie State has been established before the city of Bowie itself was, so it has its own autonomy in the sense of how it operates and how it wants to operate. So I, you know, just really, you know, hear the report tonight. I definitely want to dive more into it. My question is, how does it compete with what we already have, as well as the county?
Well, I think that one of the areas that, and again, it was a conversation I had with the city manager, because she said, well, you know, we're not like all of those other organizations, cities. True, Bowie is different, and you have different dynamics. The structure, however, the legal structure, can encompass and be whatever you want. It basically is the way that the entity, based upon your direction and the city's goals, can be under that legal structure so that you can implement the kind of things that you want to do. I think that getting Bowie involved is going to be important. And it may start at a very low level, but you can structure that entity any way that you want it to meet Bowie's needs. The legal structure is what the 501c3 brings to the table, and how it can, and what you can do under that is based upon the legal restrictions, but the legal opportunities that are there. So I think that you need to discuss that among yourselves, because you all are going to set the policy.
I think I turned my mic off. I think that's important, what you just said. Last week, instead of being here, I was on the video. I was in Detroit. And so I called in from council out there, and when you mentioned in terms of the university, they have Wayne University out there. Detroit, as we know, it was bankrupt 15 years ago, 10 years ago, and that was in my opinion, was a lack of governing, right? And when we get out of the area of focus and having that balance, to whereas we can revitalize, right? I like the word revitalize more than development, because we have something. I'm not sure if Mr. King drove you around some of the newer developments that is coming. So I don't think that we have a problem attracting development, more so than to make sure that we do great governing, as well as, just leverage and balance the land use and a lot of the permit issues that we have. So I look forward to the work session. Detroit, now you have all this development in Midtown, right in the city. But the question remains the sustainability. Are the people, the density, you have a lot of areas, but are the people coming back? And we have the people, we have the density. I definitely look forward to learning more about, this, but that's just in terms of my feelings of how I look at it right now, as a corporation.
I mean, one of the things that you have that a lot of people would love, you have great housing stock here. The historic housing stock, as well as, the new stuff that's being built and being developed here. A lot of places would really like to have that, that kind of thing. So that bodes well. I mean, your per capita income here is really high. I mean, some of the things that you want to say, they should be here because you have the per capita income to support it, but it's not here. So the question is why? And that's for all of you to wrestle with.
All right. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Council Member. I'm going to go over to Council Member Zipporah Miller.
Thank you. I think one of my questions has been answered, so good. But as I sat here, I'm a proud Bowie Bulldog. So seeing that Bowie State was woven into this report, and then also being an educator, I understood where you were coming from in terms of where that sits. My question laid around where Councilmember Truesdale was asking about where, in sort of starting ground, where did Rutgers engage? And clearly they engaged at the beginning. But there's something else that I heard you say, and I was, that I heard you say in terms of where we are as a city. We already have an economic development committee. And you stated that we have a lot of reports, ideas that have come out of it. You said, but none of them have been implemented, right? So clearly we need to go back and look at what is there, what is rich in there, and what do we need to do. So 2 questions. The first one, when you spoke in your recommendations about appointing a high-level task force to review the report, you mentioned, or maybe I misheard you, that don't use the Economic Development Committee, but go to a structure that is similar to the governance that you had expected.
Yes.
Unpack that a little bit. And the reason I'm asking for you to unpack it is because if the Economic Development Committee has come up with some ideas, I'm not saying do one or the other. I'm just curious why you didn't say.
Right. They should be part of it.
Okay. All right.
But it shouldn't just be that committee.
Okay.
Because I think you want to tap into a fresh look, an independent look, but they would bring institutional memory and the kind of background that group would have. And again, how that is structured is up to you. I still believe that you need to have some kind of community input, broad-based.
Absolutely.
And whether that comes first and then the committee, or the committee first and then, that's up for you all to decide. You know your community a lot better than I do, so you'll know the right way to go about that and how to sequence it. but I think that that's needed to do, because it needs credibility. And you need to have the community understand that you just didn't pull this out of the air, that this is something that has some emphasis to it and some justification to it and some support within the community.
Okay, that's really helpful. And I am, well, I'm going to just say, I'm looking forward to our work session because I know there are a lot of other questions that I really want to go back and digest the report. But thank you so much for being so thorough and then taking the time to walk us through it in a manner in which we can really digest it little at a time.
Yeah, I mean, the report, John said, why is the report so thick? And I said, well, I wanted to make sure I covered everything, but I left a lot of it out tonight because, you know, time, we'll be here all night. But if you can, you know, and if you want some specifics, look at the report itself. Because when I talk about marketing, I actually outlined some marketing initiatives that you could consider. So under each of the sort of 10 chapters that I looked at today, there's a lot more detail in the actual report.
So I'm curious, Mayor Mike, is he going to be a part of the work session or you don't? Okay, we don't know. Gotcha.
We got to operate within his fee, but we can figure that out.
No, I'm just curious because he had asked, and maybe I could do this offline, but I'm just curious about, you had recommended a 501c3 as a starting point, and in my notes I said, I wonder why he didn't do the hybrid. Why
Because I think you do not have enough support yet from the private sector who would finance it and be able to be actively engaged. I think if the 501c3 gets off and running, is successful, then I think you should look at having a complementary 501c6 working through the chamber as well. But I don't think you're ready to do that yet.
Mr. Nero did say we could call him, so maybe we can just put him on speaker during our work session. Hey, just quick.
Be a lot cheaper to call
couple
me
quick
by
questions,
phone
yeah.
than to bring me down.
Councilmember Brady.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for being here and reporting back on what your findings are and what have you. It's rather thorough and rather long. I think it is an interesting concept that you've defined there, and I think it's something we ought to pursue. But before I get into that, I want to be a bit of a contrarian and put the naysayer's hat on. And let me throw out 4 things why I think it won't work. 1, Bowie is about 90% residential tax base. 2, we are dependent upon park and planning for zoning and planning. We are dependent upon the county for permitting. And both of those tend to be the problems, challenges for developers coming into our community. So I'm not certain exactly why even spend any money to do anything, because it doesn't. How can we overcome those? Your thoughts on that?
Well, you're right that you have a large percentage of residential, but you do have pockets, as the councilwoman has said, and the other areas that we've discussed that do need
redevelopment,
revitalization, however you want to do it. So that is something that this entity can focus on and look at how the different ways to implement it. You're absolutely right that what I heard from your private sector developers here was permitting and zoning. I'm going to put a little bit of my political hat on and to say that you can bring to bear the kind of reform in those areas by a broad-based entity that represents not just the city. They have other cities that they're dealing with. They're all probably barking the same tune. But if you have an entity that has a firepower of private developers, the university, the city, the community folks, and apply the kind of pressure to develop the kind of MOUs or agreements on zoning and on permitting. Permitting should not take you longer to get the permit than to build the building.
Right, agreed.
And that is the challenge that every single developer here told me. in no uncertain terms, and some of it very strongly worded.
Right.
The reality of it is that if you don't try, you're never going to improve.
True.
So the concept is, and again, I go back to the definition of insanity. You keep doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. It's not going to happen. So I think that this is at least sends a message to those entities at the county, here we come. And we're going to demand this kind of reform in the permitting and in the zoning applications.
Okay. And actually, that was going to be an area I was going to touch on, but you already covered that with regards to. I'm going to take my naysayer hat off because I do believe this is something we need to pursue. And I think one comment you made, if I understood it correctly, you said, well, this is developing right off of what you said, that the EDC could be a leverage with zoning and planning and permitting. So that if we establish it and it's independent, and as you said, it's representing the other entities, organizations around development, that could make it a better environment, a more enticing environment to bring developers into the city of Bowie. Is that a correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, so it seems like it'd be very, very helpful in that. I think you also said that the EDC could act as a partner with the developers, in especially being independent of the government, the city. They have a little more leeway, a little more freedom of what they can and can't do, yes, which would, again, make it a more favorable environment in the city of Bowie for developers to come in. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And then the last one, and this is more to in general, I totally agree with the comments and the discussions with regard to Bowie State University. And I do think we have been deficient as an entity in not doing more outreach to the university and try and bring them in. I think to that end, I think we ought to agree that we're going to try and overcome that as a body. And I would suggest that we end up trying to have like a dinner with the president and her appropriate staff, the faculty senate and the appropriate officers there, senior staff and mayor and council, in order to start a discussion and see if we can't, instead of being in parallel or divergent paths, maybe come together and start working collaboratively. And I think we have a lot of opportunities, but there's been almost no discussion, no contacts, no outreach that I've seen. And I've been up here since '94 with an 8-year break. And it's unfortunate, but over that time, there's been very little coordination, if you will. So I think it's the time that we overcome that. But I think there's a lot of things you're recommending. I think we have to now sit down and have a discussion on the appropriate way to move forward. I think, in my mind, based upon what you provided, that I believe the EDC is a correct entity to accomplish many positive things with regards to economic development in the city of Bowie. It's a matter of structuring how we get there and when we start up. But at least I appreciate the background, the information you provided. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman. Just to the side about your recommendation for a dinner, I mean, one of the reasons why I suggested that this summit be held at Bowie, it's a way to get them in. It's a way to engage them, because you're asking them, you're our partner, help us. Get your faculty involved, get your students involved. So it gives them a role, it gives them a profile as well, and then it develops that partnership. Well, thank you all very much. I really enjoyed doing this. I was, as I said, I was sort of retired, and I got pulled out of retirement to do this, and I thoroughly enjoyed getting my economic development hat back on. So thank you all very much. Thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Nero. All right. To the point that folks have been making about Bowie State University, this is more of an awareness thing. I've hung out with Dr. Bro about 6 times in the last 3 months, formally and informally. I would say they are stretched a little thin right now. However, every time we've reached out or they've reached out, the engagement has been positive, and so I agree with the suggestions about finding more opportunities to pull them in. We'll just need to make sure that when it's not, we need to make sure that nobody from that side feels like we're wasting their time. That's going to be really important. So dinner had better be really good, or we could do coffee. I'm going to turn it over to staff for a quick second. We have a meeting with our bond counsel to discuss dodging financial calamity, either the 17th or the 18th of August. My understanding is that meeting will require no more than 45 minutes to an hour. My question for staff is, could we have a discussion follow-up on economic development that includes digesting and discussing the Nero report? That's an ominous sounding name, but we're going to call it that, as well as the EDC report in a meeting, and then having kind of a structured discussion with some staff recommendations? Or would staff prefer having a little bit more time to come back to us, maybe at a work session later in August or early September?
Of course, I'm going to defer to staff on that since they will be doing the heavy lifts and see, and just starting from the top, just from my reading the report, which is one of the documents that I did receive prior to starting work, I think there's some additional research or information that needs to be completed, and I would dare say that the report did a great job of outlining what the structure would look like, but I think some of the missing pieces for me is what structure or what analysis, what gaps are we trying to address to determine what structure is best. Because we talked about lack of implementation. Well, what are those barriers? I don't know that. And so to me, those need to be flushed out before we can have an informed conversation about what that structure looks like. So I don't know that I'm going to be able to have all that by the 17th, but that's why I'll defer to staff to figure out, because they may have that information and I'm just not aware of it.
Roger that. And to be clear, I suspect there's enough energy on this council on this topic that even if we don't have a lot of questions answered, I suspect they're still going to want to talk, because between this information and the information from the earlier this year EDC report, there's a ton to digest.
Sure.
And having that, never mind having that conversation the same as our bond council conversation, there could be a little good synergy there, even if we're not setting up a 501c3 that night.
And I think it's good to keep it alive,
Yeah,
the conversation,
that's
just
the
so
other
that we
point.
don't
This is
lose
momentum.
sight of the information.
Oh, sorry. Councilmember Ndivu Madu.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just going to make one request, that this be in alignment with City Council objective for fiscal year 2027, which is number 1. I'm going to read out the objective, is to develop and begin implementation of a strategic economic development and redevelopment plan focused on commercial tax-based growth, aging shopping center redevelopment, business retention, city-owned land opportunities, and reoccurring revenue diversification. Because we have a broader conversation and some funding that we've been allocated that we also need to discuss as well. So I'm just going to request that that be in alignment.
Sounds good to me. Sorry, staff.
My first concern is that you are looking at a pretty big topic about privatization, along with the EDC report, which was not on privatization, it was on redevelopment, and which was also addressed via the Urban Land Institute, TAP. I mean, they're two different topics to handle on one night there. The second part is I'm not clear what you're expecting from staff. You've got all of the reports delivered to you to seed your discussion. So I'm not certain what added documentation you're wanting, unless it's to make sure you've all got the same stack of papers that all of the past reports back to 2022.
I think there's three things we need to do. I think one is this body has gotten a lot of different information over the last couple of years on economic development, some of which, frankly, was not even contemplated in the past, specifically the EDC report. So one, I want to make sure that this body has a chance to actually sit down, make sure that we're actually have read that report, have a chance to discuss it a little bit internally in kind of a non-dais environment. I think that's part one. And to your point, that absolutely is on a related but different topic. Step two, maintain some momentum on this effort, right? Like I said, we're not going to be setting up a 501c3 that night, probably not the next night either. but having an opportunity to digest, talk about actionable things we could do in the interim, whether that's one of us is going to be in charge of talking to Bowie State, one of us is going to be in charge of driving up to New Jersey, not as a drive-through, to go talk to Rutgers or do whatever, right? But just start getting some actionable items out of that meeting where we can assign people to things and kind of maintain some positive momentum on this front. Councilmember Brady.
Similar to, and I think this suggestion has been made here recently, but similar to what we're doing with the budget with regards to the committee of the whole, and that is taking and having this as a topic to do over several work sessions, not just one. So, I mean, the fact that there's two completely separate, one is EDC possibility and the other is redevelopment of Bowie Town Center. I mean, yes, they're two distinct and different items, but they're still related to economic development. And the intent in my comment is really to say we need to have more than one and maybe even as many as 6 over the next year work sessions specifically to tackle this as an issue, because it is a complex, multifaceted item, and therefore, we need to look at multiple ones, not just one.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think that's going to be inevitable. We're going to be having a lot of conversations about this. Go ahead, Councilmember Ndubamadu.
I was just going to help with the structure, but I'll wait for the staff for a second. My recommendation, I'm in agreement with Councilmember Brady and Mayor Stev. I think this is several work sessions. My intent when I added this as an objective to the City Council objectives was that this is several sessions over the year so that we can develop the plan and implement the plan. So this is several sessions. I think what you can do to help us, since these are several topics, you can recommend a structure and a cadence for the work session. So we're gonna have 6 work sessions. Maybe let's recommend a structure for topic 1, then session 2, then session 3. That makes sense. We've talked about all of the studies that we've done, so maybe that's consolidating the first session and talking about the reoccurring themes. We got a presentation from the Bowie BIC, we got one from Bowie State University, we got one from the Economic Development, so maybe consolidating all of those. We got one from the CDC Corporation, and really talking about the themes, then moving on to this particular topic, then moving on to what redevelopment looks like in that particular topic, and that can be themes in these sessions, and just recommend a structure and an agenda so that we can stay focused. I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, and frankly, I think our first meeting, honestly, we may just want to set aside a full 45 minutes for us to quietly read these reports. Genuinely. I mean, the number of times we get 300 pages worth of documents and we don't all process the same information and come away with different interpretations. That could be a worthwhile use of our time. Yeah.
Could we get a list of which reports we're talking about?
Yeah.
Instead of just the reports.
It's the economic development, or excuse me, the city's EDC report, which came out earlier this year. Those are the 2 main ones. And then
there's been reference to the 2022 economic development. So that's what I'm saying. I just want to make sure that I have a list of what reports we're talking about, just so that we're all on the same page.
Understood. Okay. Councilmember Miller.
This is just just logistics. As we're talking about the different reports, that each report identify what problem we're trying to solve?
No, it's not structured like that.
No. Okay.
Not even a little bit.
Structured by title.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay. So staff, how about the 17th, we put economic development conversation on the agenda. I can follow up, but basically we're going to use that time to go over all the reports that we've received in recent years on the topic of economic development, read, ask any initial questions of staff, discuss it in kind of an informal setting among council, and begin assigning certain tasks. Councilmember Ndubamadu.
Can I just make a recommendation? Because there are so many reports, I don't know that 45 minutes to read 300 pages, it's a lot. That's information dense, and I don't know that we would have a productive conversation out of that after that. So my recommendation is Staff, could you just identify the reoccurring themes across the documents? There are too many AI tools for us to be doing this like this today. So maybe identify the reoccurring themes from the big presentation, the 2022 presentation, the revitalization presentation, all the presentations that we've gotten in recent years, like you've identified. Give us a consolidated report, themes, and then we can begin our discussion from there. And then you can send us the links. We can read it in our own time and be ready to discuss it on that night. I think that is helpful.
Yes, I think we definitely should get all the reports in advance. And if staff wants to offer summaries with their thoughts, they're free to do so as well. I would just ask we get that. The 17th is in 2 weeks. If we could get all the reports just emailed to us this week, that would be great. And then if staff has maybe a summary, middle of next week, I think that'd be fine. That'd give us several additional days. Cool. Sound good? Anything else from anyone? Doing great. Okay. Thank you, staff. And thank you, Mr. Nero. And for the record, he did offer to take all of our phone calls, so everyone call Frank at your leisure. All right, we're going to move on to item B under old business, adoption of amended ordinance O-7-26. I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Mears.
Thank you very much. This ordinance is to take a look at changes to require a city permit for filming production within the city. When we last discussed this at the beginning of January, there was a request for some additional change and clarification relative to the wording. Ms. Ruff, we added some language in regards to the legislation before them this evening. Is that correct?
So my understanding was that there was direction for some further clarification as to exactly who would be subject to this permit. And so to that end, we looked at Tacoma Park, we looked to Baltimore City, Baltimore County, we looked at the state's filming office, we looked at a couple of other things. Really, Tacoma Park was the one that was most on point, that provided us with what we would normally see in a municipal ordinance such as this. So we took what you said at your last meeting in June. We looked at the Tacoma Park model and came up with this, let's just say. We tried to address everything that we heard in the context of an existing ordinance that seems to work for Tacoma Park.
Sounds great. Are there any questions on this amended ordinance for staff? Sounds good. Do I hear a motion on the adoption of, I'm sorry. Do we have anyone signed up to speak, Council, or City Clerk?
No, Mayor, there's no one signed up this evening and no comments were received.
All right, we'll declare the public hearing concluded. Do I hear a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion for approval and adoption of amended ordinance 0-7-26.
Do I hear a second? Second. Moved and seconded. Any questions on the motion? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. It is adopted. Thank you, staff. Moving on to old business item B, adoption of ordinance O-8-26. Back over to staff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This ordinance is taking a look. We had a discussion during our budget work sessions to establish a new capital improvement program associated with street lighting. This provides that appropriation. We're looking to borrow approximately $16 million to do a comprehensive street lighting program, and that is included in this ordinance O-8-26. Thank you.
Any immediate questions from council? Councilmember Wolfley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple of quick questions on this. With this in mind, once all parts are in place, how long before we start work, do you think?
We are working on developing that. This is sort of a two-phased approach in regards to securing the financing and then also scheduling the work plan associated with that. We've had an initial discussion among staff in regards to each of those parts, and we're currently in the process of developing those timeframes. So a little premature to answer that for you this evening.
Then, and this may be the same answer, it may be the same answer for a slightly different question. Once we've executed the contract and so forth, how long do we think it'll take to complete the work?
That's premature as well.
All right, fair enough. All right, next question for you then. Our current spend rate, prior fiscal year, I guess would be the accurate question on that.
Yeah, we actually spent a little more than $400,000 over what we had budgeted this past year. It is increasing, and I think we're at about, it was over $1.5 million, approaching $2 million on maintenance.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Staff, when you have an ETA on the ETA, just email the council and let us know, because we got a lot of money around there on streetlights. Madam City Clerk, anyone signed up to speak?
No, Mayor, no one signed up for this one either.
Public hearing is closed. Do I hear a motion on Ordinance O-9-26?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move for adoption of Ordinance 0-8-26.
Do I hear a second? Second. Moved and seconded. Any questions on the motion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed say nay. It is adopted. Old business, item E, adoption of amended Ordinance O-10-26. Back to staff.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, this item was discussed during our budget session. There was a request from the council to consider a new staff position. We're terming this a systems integrator to assist us with bringing our software data programs into better alignment so we can advance our smart city goals. Thank you.
Madam City Clerk, anyone signed up to speak?
No, Mayor, no one signed up for this one.
Declaring the public hearing closed. Any questions from council? Hearing none. Do I hear a motion on the adoption of amended Ordinance O-10-26?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to adopt Ordinance O-9-26.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Ordinance adopted. Final one, adoption of amended Ordinance O-10-26. Back over to staff.
Thank you, Mayor. Each year, previously, the city has offered funds to the Bowie Volunteer Fire Department on a reimbursable basis for certain expenses. During our budget development, those funds were removed among budget cuts. We had a request from the council to reconsider that decision. So before you this evening is a ordinance to restore $100,000 to that program.
Madam City Clerk, anyone signed up to speak?
No, Mayor, no one signed up for this one either.
Madam Ruff.
Mr. Mayor, in reviewing this ordinance for tonight, it came to my attention that you're missing a column in the ordinance. It's an amended ordinance. It was amended after you introduced it at the last meeting. So what we should have had is your budget as adopted. The second column would have been the numbers that were in the original ordinance with the 167,000. And then there's a column on the right that would then reflect the new numbers at 100,000. And so I prepared that ordinance. The city clerk has that ordinance. And I would like for you to have the motion be to adopt that amended ordinance so that you'll see the progression of the actions that you took.
Do we have a copy?
We do not have a copy, and this came about at the last minute, and we didn't have time to make the changes. But basically, what it's doing is showing you the walkthrough of what the numbers were. The final numbers do not change. It's showing you what the numbers were before you made the amendment, and then the final numbers.
Gotcha. So 176 to 100,000. Gotcha. Okay. So, Ms. Ruff?
And so the numbers would be, if you look at what you have before you, right? You have one column that has the original budget numbers. You have one column that has the new at 100,000. The middle column that's missing is just the numbers that reflect 167,000 that are interlineated because you're no longer using those numbers. You're using the new ones on the right at 100,000.
Understood. So the motion would be to adopt an amended ordinance O-10-26.
Correct.
Roger that. Okay. Back to Madam City Clerk real quick. Anyone signed up to speak on this, Madam City Clerk?
No, Mayor, no one signed up and no comments received.
All right, public hearing closed. I'll turn it over to my colleagues. Councilmember Brady.
Yes, I would prefer that we have it and know what we're doing. I appreciate how staff is presenting it, but if there's no urgency to this, if this is something that the volunteer firefighters will tap into over the course of the next year, we just finished the first of 12 months. I would prefer, and I would move that we table this to the next meeting so we can get the proper copy and evaluate it and vote on it. So I move to table it.
There's a second on the motion.
I don't think you need a second for table. I believe Robert's rules, but.
Does anyone else want to table this motion? Personally, I don't see any reason why we can't move forward tonight. It's the same dollar amount, just the background paperwork slightly different. No one else seems interested in tabling? Okay. Do I hear a different motion?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move to adopt the amended ordinance 0-10-26 that reflects the discussion we had earlier.
Do I hear a second?
Question. Discussion.
I'll second.
All right, moved and seconded. Any questions on the motion? Councilmember Ndikumadu.
Thank you so much, Mayor Stubb. City Attorney, can you just reinstate that in layman's terms for me, please?
I thought I had used layman's terms. I apologize for that. All right, so when the ordinance was introduced, it was introduced at $167,000 being the amendment to the adopted budget. After it was introduced, council moved that $167,000 be changed to $100,000, right? So you had an ordinance before you that reflected the 167. So when you made it 100, the ordinance that had been prepared simply changed the numbers to the 100. So you'll see the 112.7 to 212.7. You'll see the 95,398,300 to 95,498,300, right? But what you were missing is showing that it was amended on the floor by council to reduce 167, which were the numbers in the original ordinance, to 100. Does that make sense? So,
and the significance of us needing to have that in writing is?
It's a legally correct way to do it, to show that what was before you, presented to you at your June meeting, was not what was adopted, that you changed those numbers, and that it shows what they were changed to and from.
Okay, so what I hear you saying is this is procedural, legally procedural.
Correct.
I'm tracking. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff?
Just clarify.
Councilmember Rogers.
So once we, if we pass it tonight, the ordinance, then it will be redone and distributed in next month's package? No. It'll just go on record with the notes.
if you adopt it, then it will
It'll become
take the normal course.
Okay.
But we can certainly send you first thing in the morning what the ordinance looks like, or the city clerk does have a copy that we could pass, I suppose, if you prefer.
Yeah, I hear it's procedural. I mean, the dollar amount doesn't change. It's procedural. And so I understand that aspect of it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Not a problem. Any other questions for staff? All right. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, say nay.
Abstain.
One abstention. Okay. Thank you, staff. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So
Mr. Ma-
moved. I'm sorry.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, everyone's favorite motion to adjourn.
Do I hear a second? All in favor, say aye. All opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? All right. Thank you.